Have you ever had the person you love look you in the eye and make you realize they never respected you? He called off our engagement because I lacked status. Then, 72 hours later, tried a financial stunt that made me laugh at the sheer audacity. He forgot that I do not need tears for revenge. I only need a bank statement, a timely email, and a party where the cold, hard truth walks in on its own. My name is Mia Rogers. I am 33 years old, and for the last 4 years, I have been an accessory to a life that never quite fit me. I work as a career counselor at a large public high school in the suburbs. It is a job that requires patience, empathy, and the ability to find a path through chaos. I make $61,000 a year. To me, that salary represents security. It means I can pay my rent, put money into my savings, and buy the good coffee beans on Saturday mornings without guilt. I live a quiet life, or at least I did before I agreed to marry Grant Mercer. Grant is 36. He is a client development manager for a tech firm that specializes in things I still do not fully understand, mostly because he uses buzzwords like synergy and vertical integration whenever I ask. He is handsome in a way that looks expensive. He has the kind of hair that stays perfect in a windstorm and a smile that he practices in the mirror. We had been engaged for 10 months. The wedding was scheduled for June. We had already paid the deposits for the venue, the photographer, and the DJ. We even had a joint savings account, jokingly titled the Future Empire Fund, meant for a down payment on a house. But looking back, I think I always knew I was merely a placeholder in Grant's carefully curated existence. I was the safe option. I was the woman who would organize his life, listen to his complaints about his boss, and never outshine him. Until last night. Last night was the third Thursday of the month, which meant it was time for the rotation dinner with Grant's college friends. This group terrified me. They were not bad people in the criminal sense, but they were exhausting in a way that drains the soul. There was Jason, who worked in venture capital, and his wife, Elise, who was the vice president of something important at a pharmaceutical company. There was Brad, who had just made partner at his law firm, and his fiancé, Chloe, who ran a boutique PR agency for crisis management. And then there was us, Grant and Mia, the manager and the guidance counselor. We met at a steakhouse downtown where the lighting was so dim you needed a flashlight to read the prices, which was the point. If you had to look at the price, you did not belong there. I wore the black dress Grant liked, the one that he said made me look sleek. I felt like I was wearing a costume. The conversation started the way it always did. Jason talked about his stock options vesting. Brad talked about the billable hours he crushed last week. Elise mentioned she was flying to Zurich on Tuesday for a board meeting. Grant nodded along, leaning forward, laughing a little too loudly at their jokes. I watched him. I saw the way his eyes darted around the table, checking to see if he was being approved of. He was performing. He was desperate to be seen as their equal, even though I knew he was maxing out 2 credit cards to keep up with their lifestyle. Then the topic shifted to honeymoons. Brad and Chloe were going to the Maldives. They spent 10 minutes discussing the exact square footage of their overwater bungalow and the private butler service. Jason and Elise reminisced about their 3 weeks in the Swiss Alps, listing the names of ski resorts I could never pronounce. Then, the table turned to us. "So, Grant, Mia," Chloe asked, swirling her wine glass, "have you two finalized the honeymoon yet? Please tell me you aren't doing the Caribbean. It is so crowded this time of year." Grant opened his mouth, likely to invent something sounding impressive, but I spoke first. I was tired. I had spent the day helping a terrified 17-year-old fill out financial aid forms so he could be the first in his family to go to college. I did not have the energy to lie. "Actually, Faye, we were thinking of a road trip," I said, smiling. "We want to hit the national parks, Zion, maybe drive up to Yellowstone, just rent a camper van and disappear into nature for 2 weeks." The silence that followed was instantaneous. It was not a comfortable silence. It was the kind of silence that happens when someone drops a glass on a tile floor. Elise blinked. Jason looked at his steak. Then, Chloe laughed. It was a polite, tinkling sound, sharp as a razor blade. "Oh," she said. That is quaint, like a gap year project. That is very sweet. Mia? She did not mean it was sweet. She meant it was pathetic. Grant did not defend me. He did not say that we both loved hiking, or that we had talked about seeing the Grand Canyon since our second date. Instead, he stiffened. He took a long sip of his scotch and offered a tight, apologetic smile to the group. We are still looking at options, Grant said, his voice smooth. Mia loves the outdoors, but I am trying to convince her to look at luxury resorts in Amalfi. You know how it is. He erased me, in 2 sentences. He rewrote our plans to fit the expectations of 4 people who would not remember this dinner in a week. I did not speak for the rest of the meal. I ate my potatoes, drank my water, and watched the man I was supposed to marry shrink into a shape that would fit into their world. The ride home was excruciating. Grant drove his least luxury sedan in silence. Usually, he would have the radio on, or he would be debriefing me on the gossip from the dinner. Tonight, the car was a vacuum. The streetlights flickered past us in a rhythmic blur. I looked out the window and realized I felt nothing. No anger, no anxiety, just a strange, dull numbness. We arrived at my apartment building. Grant parked the car but did not turn off the engine. The low hum of the motor was the only sound between us. He gripped the steering wheel with both hands, his knuckles white. We need to talk, he said. It is the sentence every partner dreads. But I only felt a mild curiosity. Okay, I said. Do you want to come up? He shook his head. No, I can say this here. He turned to look at me. The dashboard lights cast shadows across his face, making him look older, harder. He looked at me not with love, or even with sadness, but with a cold calculation. He looked at me like I was a line item on a budget that needed to be cut. I think we should call off the engagement, he said. He said it quickly, ripping off the bandage. I sat there, waiting for the devastation to hit me. I waited for the tears to prick my eyes, for my heart to hammer against my ribs. I waited to beg him, to ask him why, to promise I would be better, but the devastation did not come. Why? I asked. My voice was steady. It surprised both of us. Grant sighed, an impatient sound. He ran a hand through his perfect hair. Look, Mia, tonight made it clear. I am moving in a certain direction. My career is taking off. I am going to be a VP by 40. I need a partner who understands that world, who fits into that world. He paused, and then he delivered the line that would stay with me for the rest of my life. All my friends are marrying executives, he said, looking me dead in the eye. You do not. He did not even finish the grammar of the thought, but the meaning was violent in its clarity. You do not matter. You do not measure up. You do not bring me status. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the insecurity masked as ambition. I saw the cruelty masked as pragmatism. And suddenly, the air in the car changed. For months, I had felt like I was suffocating, trying to be the woman Grant wanted. I had been holding my breath, walking on eggshells, trying to shrink myself to fit into his life. Now, he had just opened the door. A wave of relief washed over me. It was physical. My shoulders dropped. My chest expanded. I felt like I had just stepped out of a room that was slowly running out of oxygen and taken my first deep breath of fresh, cold air. I was free. I did not cry. I did not scream. I did not throw my purse at him or demand he explain how 4 years could be discarded because I wanted to go to a national park. I looked down at my left hand. The diamond was a solitaire, tasteful, something Grant had chosen because it looked correct, not because it was special. I reached over with my right hand and slid the ring off my finger. It came off easily. I placed the ring on the center console, right next to his expensive leather driving gloves. The metal made a small click against the plastic. Okay, I said. Grant blinked. He looked confused. He had rehearsed this scene. I was sure of it. He had expected a fight. He had expected me to plead. He had prepared his arguments, his defenses. He was ready to be the rational man dealing with an emotional woman. My calmness terrified him. "Okay," he repeated, his brow furrowing. "That is it. Just okay." "You made your decision," I said. I opened the car door. The night air rushed in, cool and sharp. "You want an executive. I am a guidance counselor. You are right. We do not fit." I stepped out of the car. I did not look back. "Mia, wait," he called out, rolling down the window. "Do not be childish. We need to discuss the logistics, the apartment lease, the deposits." "Good night, Grant," I said. I walked to the front door of my building. My heels clicked against the pavement, a steady, rhythmic sound. I punched in my code. The buzzer sounded, and I pulled the heavy glass door open. I could feel him watching me from the car. I knew he was sitting there, stunned, unable to process that I had accepted his rejection so easily. He wanted me to be broken. He wanted to be the main character in a tragedy where he was the reluctant hero making a hard choice by walking away. I denied him that role. I got into the elevator and pressed the button for the 4th floor. As the doors slid shut, cutting off the view of the street, I checked my pulse. It was slow, steady. I walked into my apartment. It was dark and quiet. On the dining table, there was a stack of bridal magazines and a binder labeled Wedding Logistics in Grant's handwriting. I walked over to the table and closed the binder. Grant Mercer thought he had just discarded a liability. He thought he had trimmed the fat from his life so he could ascend to the greatness he believed he deserved. He had no idea what he had actually done. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. I stood by the window, looking down at the street. His car was gone. The sadness would probably come later. The grief of losing 4 years would eventually hit me on a Tuesday afternoon or while I was grocery shopping. But tonight, there was only clarity. He said I was not an executive. He said I did not fit. He was right. I was not an executive. I was the woman who managed our finances because he was too busy networking to pay the electric bill. I was the woman who had built our credit scores. I was the woman who had saved $38,400 into a joint account for a house he claimed he wanted. I took a sip of water. My phone buzzed on the counter. I ignored it. I was not an executive. I was something much more dangerous to a man like Grant. I was the one who kept the receipts. I turned off the kitchen light and walked into my bedroom. For the first time in 10 months, I slept in the middle of the bed. I slept soundly. I did not know it yet. But the war had already started. Grant had fired the first shot, but he had forgotten one crucial detail. He had left the ammunition in my bank account. The morning sun hit the living room floor at 7 o'clock, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. I sat at my dining table with a cup of black coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. My laptop was open. The screen glowed with the blue and white interface of my online banking portal. I was not looking at photos of us. I was not looking at his Instagram to see if he had posted a cryptic quote about heartbreak. I was looking at the ledger of our life together. Or rather, the ledger of my life that he had been living in rent-free. I clicked on the savings account nicknamed the Future Empire Fund. The balance stared back at me in bold, black numbers, $38,400.12. I stared at that number for a long time. $38,000. To Grant, that amount was probably a down payment on a boat he would use twice a summer, or a buy-in for a partnership he was not actually invited to join. To me, that money was 4 years of bagged lunches. It was 4 years of driving a Honda Civic with a dent in the rear bumper because I did not want to pay the deductible to fix it. It was 4 years of saying no to girls' trips and yes to extra shifts monitoring Saturday detention. And here was the most important detail. The detail that Grant had seemingly forgotten in his haste to discard me for a higher tax bracket. The account was in my name, technically. It was intended to be a joint account. When we first opened it 3 years ago, we sat in the bank cubicle with a nice lady named Brenda. Grant had charmed her, naturally. He talked about his trajectory in client development and how we were building a war chest for a colonial house in the suburbs. But when it came time to provide the second form of identification and sign the signature card, Grant realized he had forgotten his passport. He told Brenda to just open it under my name for now to get the interest rate locked in, and he would come back the next week to add his name. He never went back. I clicked on the transaction history tab. I adjusted the filter to show the last 36 months. I wanted to see the story the numbers told. Numbers do not gaslight you. Numbers do not tell you they love you and then humiliate you in front of a vice president. Numbers just sit there, absolute and unyielding. I scrolled down. Deposit, $1,000. Source Mia Rogers payroll. Deposit, $500. Source Mia Rogers payroll. Deposit, $800. Source Mia Rogers tax refund. I kept scrolling, looking for a break in the pattern. I was looking for Grant. I remembered the conversations vividly. They played in my head like scenes from a movie I was only now understanding the plot of. 2 years ago, in this very kitchen, Grant had just come home with a new set of golf clubs. They were sleek, shiny, and cost more than my first car. "Grant," I had said, trying to keep my voice light. "We agreed to put $200 each into the house fund this month." He had laughed, kissing me on the forehead as if I were a child worrying about pennies. "Babe, you have to look at the big picture. These clubs are an investment. My boss plays at the country club every Saturday. If I am going to get that promotion, I need to play where he plays, and I cannot show up with a rental set. That looks desperate." "But the house," I had said. "The bonus is coming next quarter," he had promised. "I will dump $5,000 in there at once. You will see. It is all about liquidity. Mia, you worry too much about the drip feed." I scrolled down another year on the screen. There was no $5,000 deposit. There was, however, a withdrawal of $2,000. I frowned, clicking on the detail. It was a transfer to his checking account. I remembered that day too. He had called me from a mechanic's shop, frantic. His luxury sedan needed a new transmission part that had to be imported from Germany. He was short on cash because of a payroll glitch at his company. He swore he would pay it back the next Friday. I checked the deposits for the month following that withdrawal. Nothing. The realization hit me not with a bang, but with a slow, creeping chill. I had not just been his fiancé, I had been his financier. I had been his safety net. While he was out buying rounds of drinks for executives to prove he was one of them, I was home transferring $50 here and $20 there to ensure we did not overdraw. My phone buzzed on the table, vibrating against the wood. It was Grant. I looked at the time. It was 8:15 in the morning. Less than 12 hours since he had left me on the sidewalk. I did not pick up. I watched the screen light up with his name, a photo of him smiling in a tuxedo at a gala we attended last year. He looked perfect. I looked at the notification that followed the missed call, a text message. "Mia, we need to be adults about this." I waited. A second message appeared. "I know you are upset, but be fair. That fund was for our future. I need my share of the liquidity to put a deposit on a new apartment. I am staying at a hotel and it is adding up." I let out a short, dry laugh. It was the only sound in the apartment. He did not ask if I was okay. He did not apologize for the cruelty of his words last night. He did not ask if I had slept. He asked for liquidity. He used the same corporate buzzword he used to justify buying golf clubs. Only now he was using it to demand money he had never actually earned. Be fair. The audacity of those two words made me sit up straighter. He was banking on my niceness. He was banking on the fact that Mia Rogers was a guidance counselor who taught teenagers about conflict resolution and empathy. He thought I would split the money just to make the pain go away. He thought I would write him a check for $19,000 just to avoid a fight. He was wrong. I did not reply to the text. I did not block him either. Information was power, and I needed to know exactly what he was thinking. Instead, I opened a new spreadsheet. I named it simply the audit. I spent the next 3 hours doing something that would have bored Grant to tears. I became a forensic accountant of my own relationship. I downloaded every single bank statement from the last 3 years. I converted them into PDF files. Then, I used the highlighting tool. I highlighted every single deposit that came from my paycheck in yellow. I highlighted every single deposit that came from his paycheck in green. By noon, my screen was a sea of yellow. The green was pathetic. There were sporadic deposits, $200 here, $300 there, usually followed immediately by a withdrawal of a similar amount for emergency expenses. I did the math. Of the $38,400 in the account, Grant had contributed a net total of roughly $1,200 over 3 years. And that was being generous. I saved the file. Then I created a folder on my desktop named Receipts. I moved on to the wedding expenses. This was messier. We had a separate spreadsheet for the wedding, but the payments had come from different places. I pulled up the contracts. The photographer, $2,000 deposit, paid via my Visa card. The DJ, $800 deposit, paid via Zelle from my personal checking account. The florist, $1,500 deposit, paid via check from the joint fund. I organized them all. I downloaded every invoice, every email confirmation, every receipt. I was building a fortress of paper. Then, at 1:30 in the afternoon, an email popped into my inbox that made my stomach drop. Subject: Contract clarification. Rogers/Mercer wedding, June 12th. Sender events, team at the Gilded Oak. The Gilded Oak was our venue. It was a beautiful, restored historic mansion on the edge of the city. It was the most expensive thing we had booked. The deposit alone was $8,000. I opened the email. Dear Mia, we received a call this morning regarding the cancellation of your event scheduled for June 12th. We are so sorry to hear the news. Per our phone conversation with Mr. Mercer, we are preparing the cancellation paperwork. However, we need to clarify the refund destination before we process the wire transfer. Could you please call us at your earliest convenience? Sincerely, Jessica, event coordinator. I froze. Per our phone conversation with Mr. Mercer, Grant had called them. He had called them before I did. I picked up my phone and dialed the venue immediately. My heart was beating a little faster now, not out of sadness, but out of a sharp, protective instinct. The Gilded Oak, Jessica speaking. Hi, Jessica, I said. My voice was calm, professional. It was my work voice. This is Mia Rogers. I just received your email. Oh, Mia, hi. Jessica sounded flustered. Her tone dropped an octave, that sympathetic hush people use when talking to a jilted bride. I am so sorry to hear about the cancellation. It happens. Really. Do not feel bad. It is fine, Jessica. I cut her off gently. I am calling about the refund clarification. What seems to be the confusion? There was a pause on the other end. I could hear the clicking of a keyboard. Well, Jessica hesitated. Mr. Mercer called about an hour ago. He was very assertive. He informed us that the wedding was off and demanded that we process the refund of the deposit immediately. I see, I said. The contract states that if we cancel 6 months in advance, we are entitled to a 75% refund, that is $6,000. Correct, Jessica said. The issue is the destination account. Mr. Mercer provided us with a routing and account number and instructed us to wire the funds there today. He said it was the primary account for the wedding expenses. My hand tightened around the phone. Jessica, I said, keeping my voice steady. Can you read me the last 4 digits of the account number he gave you? Sure, let me check. It ends in 4492. I looked at my laptop screen. My checking account ended in 8801. The joint savings account ended in 3356. 4492 was Grant's personal checking account. He was trying to intercept the venue refund. He knew that $6,000 was coming back, and he was trying to divert it into his own pocket before I even picked up the phone. He had broken off the engagement because I was not executive material, but he had no problem acting like a petty thief the moment the ring was off. Jessica, I said, and this time, my voice dropped in temperature. Do not transfer those funds. Okay, Jessica sounded nervous. But he was very insistent. He said he paid for the venue. He lied, I said. I have the bank statement right here in front of me showing the wire transfer of $8,000 on October 4th, coming directly from my personal savings account. I can email you the proof within 30 seconds. Oh, Jessica said. Oh, I see. Furthermore, I continued, leaning into the logic, letting the anger fuel my focus rather than my volume. The contract for the venue is signed by both of us, but the financial liability clause lists me as the primary payer. If you transfer that money to an account that does not match the source of the payment, I will have to dispute the charge with my bank as fraud. That would freeze your merchant account, wouldn't it? It was a bluff. I was not entirely sure it would freeze their merchant account, but I knew businesses hated the word fraud, and they hated chargeback disputes even more. Please do not do that, Jessica said quickly. We definitely want to follow protocol here. If you can send me that statement, I will flag the file. We will not release any funds without your written authorization. Thank you, Jessica, I said. I am sending it now. I hung up. My hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from adrenaline. He had tried to steal $6,000. It was not just about the money, it was about the entitlement. He truly believed that everything in our orbit belonged to him, the status, the image, the money. He thought I was just a supporting character who would fade into the background, leaving him with the assets. I sent the email to Jessica with the attached bank statement. I watched the progress bar turn blue and disappear. Sent. I sat back in my chair. The apartment was silent, but inside my head, the gears were turning faster than they ever had before. If he was trying to divert the venue money, what else was he doing? I looked at the pile of receipts on my virtual desktop. I looked at the future Empire Fund that he felt entitled to split. Grant Mercer had made a fatal error in judgment. He thought he was dealing with a heartbroken woman who would hide under the covers. He forgot that before I was a fiancé, I was the one who read the fine print. I picked up my phone. I saw his text message again. Be fair. I opened the messaging app. I did not type a paragraph. I did not scream. I typed 5 words. I am auditing the accounts. I hit send. Then I put the phone down and went to the kitchen to make a fresh pot of coffee. I had a feeling I was going to need the caffeine. The money was safe for the moment. But the man I had almost married was beginning to struggle. And when a man like Grant struggles, he does not apologize, he attacks. I needed to be ready for the next move. I took a sip of the hot coffee and looked at the calendar on the wall. The date of our would-be wedding was circled in red marker. I walked over to the calendar, took the marker, and calmly crossed it out with a single, black X. Then I went back to my laptop. I had more contracts to cancel. And I had a distinct feeling that the venue was just the beginning of his clumsy attempt at a cash grab. The dismantling of a wedding is not a loud, dramatic event. It does not sound like shattering glass or screaming matches. It sounds like the soft, rhythmic clicking of a laptop keyboard. It sounds like the beep of a phone notification confirming a wire transfer. It sounds like the sudden, heavy silence of a room where a future has just been deleted. I sat at my desk, the same place where I graded student essays on ambition and resilience, and treated the death of my relationship like a project management task. I had opened a new spreadsheet. I titled it simply The Exit Strategy. Column of vendor name, column B, contract holder, column C, refund status, column D. The Grant factor. The Grant factor was my own personal metric for how difficult Grant would make the process. If a contract required his signature, the Grant factor was high. If it was just me, the Grant factor was 0. I focused on the zeros first. I needed to clear the board. I needed to strip the wedding down to its studs so that by the time Grant realized what was happening, there would be nothing left for him to claim. I started with the photographer. Her name was Sarah, and she was an artist who charged $4,000 for 8 hours of coverage. I had paid the deposit of $2,000 from my personal checking account 6 months ago because Grant had said his assets were tied up in a high-yield portfolio that week. I drafted the email. Dear Sarah, Please accept this note as formal notification that the wedding scheduled for June 12th is canceled. Per the terms of our agreement, I understand the retainer is non-refundable, but I'm requesting the return of the second installment I paid early last month. Please confirm receipt. I hit send. I did not cry. I did not feel a pang of loss for the photos we would never take. I just felt efficient. I felt the strange, cold comfort of following a rule book. Next was the DJ, then the florist, then the bakery. Each contract was a little trap I had set for myself, and now I was disarming them one by one. Most of the vendors were sympathetic. They replied within the hour. So sorry to hear this. Mia, check is in the mail. We have voided the remaining balance. Take care. It was surgical. I was removing the tumor of the wedding from my life, but the biggest complication remained the gilded oak. After my phone call with Jessica, the event coordinator, I knew this was where the war would be fought. The venue contract was the only one that had both our names on it. Even though I had paid the $8,000 deposit, I called Jessica back at 2 p.m. I have a proposal, I said, my voice steady. Hi, Mia. Jessica sounded weary. She had probably been dreading this call. Look, I spoke to my manager, because both names are on the contract. Technically, we need a mutual release form signed by both parties to cancel without penalty and issue the full refund. I knew this, and I knew Grant. If I sent him a mutual release form, he would not sign it. He would use it as leverage. He would hold it hostage to force me to meet him, or worse, he would demand half the money as a settlement for his emotional distress, despite never having paid a dime. I do not have time for a mutual release, I told Jessica, and I do not want to communicate with him. What is the penalty if one party unilaterally cancels the event? Jessica hesitated. Well, if you cancel unilaterally, it is considered a breach. We retain a 20% administrative fee from the deposit, and we release the remaining funds to the original payment source immediately to close the file. 20%. That was $1,600. I did the math in my head instantly. I could fight Grant for weeks to get his signature, enduring his texts, his manipulation, and his demands, all to save $1,600. Or I could pay $1,600 right now to buy my total and complete freedom. It was the price of an exit ticket. Do it, I said. Are you sure? Jessica asked. That is a lot of money to lose. I am not losing it, I said, looking at the empty space on my finger where the ring used to be. I am paying it to make him go away, process the cancellation under my name, send the remaining $6,400 to my account. Today. Okay, Jessica said. I can do that. And Jessica, I added, please ensure the cancellation notification goes to all emails on file. Of course. I hung up. I felt lighter. I had just lost $1,600, but I had gained something far more valuable. I had cut the last legal tether between Grant Mercer and me. The backlash was immediate. At 4:30, my phone began to buzz. It vibrated against the wood of my desk like an angry insect. Grant. What the hell are you doing, Grant? I just got an email from the venue. You canceled. Without discussing the terms, Grant. You are throwing money away. We could have negotiated that fee. Grant, pick up the phone. Pick up the I watched the messages roll in. He was not upset that the wedding was off. He was the one who called it off. He was upset that I was handling it. He was upset that I was spending our money, which was actually my money, to erase him without his permission. He wanted to be the one to cancel. He wanted to be the executive making the hard call to the vendors. By doing it myself, I had robbed him of his power trip. I did not reply. I silenced the phone and went to the kitchen to make a sandwich. I realized I had not eaten since the steakhouse dinner. The bread tasted dry. But I forced it down. Fuel. I needed fuel. 30 minutes later, the buzzer to my apartment building rang. I froze. My building was old. It had a difficult intercom system and a heavy front gate. Grant had only been here a handful of times in 4 years. He hated my apartment. He called it quaint, in a tone that meant cramped. He usually made me drive to his condo downtown, or we met at restaurants. He had never bothered to learn the door code. I walked to the intercom. Yes. Mia, let me in. It was Grant. His voice was distorted by the static, but the arrogance cut right through. No, I said. Do not be ridiculous, he snapped. I am downstairs. Someone let me into the vestibule. I am at your actual door. Open it. I felt a cold spike of adrenaline. He was not at the front gate. He was outside my unit door. He had tailgated a neighbor in. I walked to my front door. It was a solid oak door with a peephole. I looked through the glass. There he was. He was wearing his navy blue suit, the one he wore for big client presentations. His tie was perfectly knotted. He looked polished, expensive, and furious. He was looking at his phone, probably checking to see if I had read his texts. He raised his hand and knocked, 3 sharp, authoritative raps. Mia, he said, I know you are in there. Open the door. We need to have a debrief. A debrief. He was treating our breakup like a failed marketing campaign. I did not unlock the deadbolt. I did not undo the chain. I simply stood on the other side of the wood, less than 3 inches away from him, separated by a barrier he could not charm his way through. Go away. Grant, I said. My voice was loud enough for him to hear, but I did not shout. I am not leaving until we settle this, he said. You are making irrational decisions. You canceled the venue and took a penalty fee. That is financial negligence. We need to consolidate the remaining funds and divide them equitably. There are no remaining funds to divide, I said through the door. I retrieved my deposits. The money that came from my account has returned to my account. The audit is done. Your account? He laughed. A harsh, barking sound. We were partners. That money was earmarked for our future. You cannot just claw it back because you are emotional. I am not emotional, I said. I am accurate. Mia, open the door. His voice dropped, trying a new tactic. The reasonable guy, the manager calming down a hysterical employee. Look, I get it. You are hurt. I was harsh last night, but we have to handle the optics of this. My friends are asking questions. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door. There it was, the real reason he was standing in my hallway on a Monday evening. Your friends, I repeated. Yes, Jason and Elise, he said. They saw the email about the registry being deactivated. They are texting me. They want to know what happened. You are making it look like a crisis. You are making me look bad. I closed my eyes. For 4 years, I had worried about making him look bad. I had dressed the way he wanted, laughed at jokes I found offensive, and silenced my own opinions so he could shine. I had been his prop. I had been the lighting technician for the Grant Mercer show. Grant? I said. What? He demanded. How did you find my apartment number? I asked. You never remember it. You always call me to come down. There was a silence on the other side of the door. I asked Brad, he muttered. He had it in the invite list database. He had to ask his friend for his fiancé's address. The realization made me feel sick, but it also solidified the steel in my spine. Go home, Grant, I said. Not until we agree on a narrative, he said, his voice rising. I cannot have people thinking I just abandoned you. We need a joint statement. We need to say it was mutual, that we grew apart. It was not mutual, I said. You told me I was not good enough. You told me I did not fit your tax bracket. I was stressed, he argued. I was trying to help you see reality. Mia, open the door. I do not want to shout this in the hallway. Then stop shouting, I said. I took a breath. This was it, the moment I stopped playing the role. I am not opening the door, Grant. And I am not issuing a joint statement. You owe me this, he hissed. After 4 years, you owe me a clean break. It stopped being ours when you made me an accessory, I said. The words came out with a clarity that surprised me. I was never your partner. I was just part of your portfolio. And now you have divested. Mia, stop being dramatic. My reputation is on the line here. If you go around playing the victim, it affects my standing. Jason is considering me for a partnership track. I cannot have a messy domestic situation clouding that. I stepped back from the door. I looked at the deadbolt. It was engaged. I was safe. I am not managing your reputation anymore, I said. I said it quietly, but I knew he heard it. What? I am not managing your reputation anymore, I repeated, louder. I am not your PR agent. I am not your crisis manager, and I am certainly not your bank. Tell your friends whatever you want. Tell them I was crazy. Tell them I ran away to join a circus. I do not care. Mia, he pounded on the door once. It was a sound of impotent rage. Goodbye. Grant. I walked away from the door. I walked down the short hallway of my apartment, past the kitchen, into the living room. Mia. Open this door, he yelled. I sat down on my sofa. I picked up the remote and turned on the television. I turned the volume up, not loud enough to disturb the neighbors, but loud enough to drown out the voice of the man in the hallway. I sat there for 10 minutes, watching a cooking show where someone was aggressively chopping onions. Eventually, the shouting stopped. I heard the heavy footsteps recede down the hallway. I heard the elevator ding. He was gone. I looked around my apartment. It was small. The furniture was a mix of IKEA and thrift store finds. It was not executive. It was not impressive. But it was mine. I realized then that I had not just canceled a wedding. I had canceled a performance. For 4 years, I had been auditioning for the role of Grant's wife, studying the lines, wearing the costumes, trying to hit my marks. And he had fired me. But standing in the quiet of my living room, with the refund notifications stacking up in my inbox and the deadbolt firmly locked, I realized something else. He did not fire me. I had walked off the set, and for the first time in a long time, I did not have to worry about the reviews. I pulled my laptop onto my lap. The spreadsheet was still open. Venue canceled. Grant locked out. I typed into the last row, status free. But I knew Grant. I knew the silence in the hallway was temporary. He was a man who needed to win, and if he could not win the money, and he could not win the narrative, he would try to win the pain. He would come back, and he would not come back alone. He would bring lawyers. I closed the laptop, let him come. I had the receipts, and for the first time in my life, I was not afraid of a fight. I was looking forward to it. 3 days after Grant tried to force his way into my apartment, a courier arrived. It was a Thursday afternoon, and the sky was a bruised shade of gray that threatened rain, but never quite delivered. The courier was a young man who looked bored, chewing gum as he handed me a thick, rigid cardboard envelope. He needed a signature. I signed my name, the pen scratching loudly against the electronic pad. I took the envelope inside and set it on the kitchen counter. It had a heavy, significant feel to it. The return address was a law firm I did not recognize, something generic like Stratton, Miller, and Associates. My heart did not race. The panic that used to define my relationship with Grant, the constant worry that I had said the wrong thing or worn the wrong dress, was gone. In its place was a cold, analytical curiosity. I opened the envelope. Inside was a document titled Notice of Demand for Equitable Asset Distribution. It was 5 pages long. I made a cup of tea, sat down, and read it. The language was designed to intimidate. It was full of words that sounded expensive. It spoke of implied partnership, promissory estoppel, and detrimental reliance. It argued that because we had been engaged and had cohabitated, which was a stretch, considering he only stayed over 3 nights a week, our finances were effectively merged by intent, if not by title. The demand was specific. Mr. Mercer was requesting the immediate transfer of $19,200. I looked at the number. $19,200. It was exactly 50% of the $38,400 currently sitting in my savings account. He was not asking for the money he had contributed. He was asking for half of the total. He was arguing that my savings were actually our savings, regardless of who had deposited the checks. The letter claimed that he had paid for lifestyle expenses, dinners, trips, entertainment, which allowed me to save money, and therefore, he was entitled to a return on that investment. It was a masterclass in gaslighting. Translated into legalese, he was essentially billing me for the privilege of having dated him. I did not call Grant. I did not text him to ask if he was serious. I knew he was serious. He was desperate. He had probably boasted to his friends about his liquidity. And now that the wedding refund had been blocked, he needed cash to maintain the facade. Instead, I picked up my phone and called Tessa Rowan. Tessa and I had gone to college together. While I went into education, Tessa went into contract law. She was currently a senior associate at a firm that handled corporate litigation. She was sharp, cynical, and the only person I knew who found legal threats amusing. "Mia," she answered on the second ring. "To what do I owe the pleasure? Please tell me you are not calling to invite me to a wedding shower." "The wedding is off," I said, "and I have a letter I need you to read." I scanned the document and emailed it to her. I stayed on the line while she opened it. I could hear the hum of her office in the background, the sounds of a high-rise city life that Grant so desperately wanted to be part of. "Okay, I have it," Tessa said. "Let me see." There was silence for about 2 minutes. I sipped my tea. Then, Tessa laughed. It was a single, sharp sound, like a bark. "Oh, this is rich," she said. "Who wrote this? It says Stratton, Miller, but the syntax is all over the place. This reads like someone used a template they found online and used a thesaurus to make the words sound bigger." "Is it valid?" I asked. "Mia," Tessa said, her voice dropping into her professional register, "anyone can write a demand letter. I can write a demand letter to the moon demanding it stop shining in my window. That does not mean the moon has to pay me." She paused, likely scrolling to the section about lifestyle expenses. "He is arguing that buying you steaks at dinner entitles him to half your paycheck," Tessa said, sounding incredulous. "That is not how the law works. Unless you have a written agreement stating that you were pooling assets, or unless you live in a jurisdiction with very specific common law marriage statutes, which you do not, and you did not live together long enough anyway, this is garbage. It is a shakedown." "He wants $19,200, I said. "Courts do not split savings accounts based on vibes," Tessa said. "He is banking on you being scared. He thinks you see a law firm letterhead, and you cut a check to make the scary lawyers go away. It is a bully tactic. I am not scared," I told her. "Good," Tessa said, "because we are going to squash this." "Do you have the records you mentioned? The bank statements?" "I have everything," I said. "I have a spreadsheet." "I love you," Tessa said. "Send it to me. We are going to write a response. We are not going to argue with his philosophy. We are just going to hit him with the math." We spent the next hour drafting the letter. It was a beautiful piece of writing. It was not emotional. It did not mention our relationship, our breakup, or his infidelity to the truth. It was cold, hard, and boring. "Dear Mr. Stratton, we are in receipt of your demand letter dated January 24th regarding the assets of Miss Mia Rogers. Please be advised that the account in question, account ending in 3356, is a sole proprietorship account held exclusively in the name of Mia Rogers. Enclosed, please find Exhibit A, a certified banking history for the entirety of the account's existence. As the records demonstrate, 97% of all deposits originated from the payroll of the Brookridge School District, directly attributable to Miss Rogers' employment. The remaining 3% consists of tax refunds issued to Miss Rogers. There is no record of any deposit, wire transfer, or contribution from Mr. Grant Mercer. There is no written agreement regarding shared assets. There is no joint tenancy. Any further harassment regarding these solely held funds will be considered an attempt at extortion and will be forwarded to the appropriate authorities. Sincerely, Tessa Rowan, Attorney at Law. "Do you want to add anything personal?" Tessa asked, as she finalized the draft. "A go to hell, perhaps." "No," I said. "He hates being ignored. Facts are the worst insult I can give him." We sent the letter via certified mail the next morning. I also emailed a copy to the email address listed on his letterhead. Then, I waited. I expected an explosion. I expected him to come banging on my door again, but the result was silence. Grant went completely dark. He did not text. He did not call. The silence lasted for 3 days, then 4, then a full week. It was the silence of a predator who realizes the gate is locked. He had tried to use his physical presence to intimidate me, and I had locked the door. He had tried to use the legal system to rob me, and I had shown him the receipts. He was running out of ammunition. But a man like Grant does not just give up. If he could not win on the facts, he would change the battlefield to a place where facts did not matter. He took the war to the court of public opinion. It started slowly. I was not on social media much. I had deactivated my Facebook and Instagram shortly after the breakup to avoid the inevitable pity likes, but the digital world has a way of leaking into the real one. I ran into a mutual acquaintance at the grocery store. Her name was Sarah, a friend of Chloe's. We were in the produce aisle, both reaching for avocados. When she saw me, her eyes went wide. She pulled her hand back as if I were contagious. "Oh," she said. "Mia, hi." "Hi, Sarah," I said, offering a polite smile. I did not expect to see you," she stammered. "I heard you were taking some time away, to process." "Process what?" I asked, picking up an avocado and checking it for ripeness. Everything," she said vaguely. She looked at me with a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. "Grant mentioned that you were having a really hard time, that you were unstable." I placed the avocado in my basket. "Did he?" "Yeah," Sarah said, gaining a little confidence. "He said the pressure of the wedding really got to you, that you guys called it off because you were overwhelmed by his lifestyle. He said he tried to be supportive, but you just snapped." I felt a cold fire ignite in my chest. Snapped. That was the narrative. I was the fragile school counselor who couldn't handle the high-stakes world of her successful fiancé. "He also mentioned," Sarah lowered her voice, leaning in conspiratorially, "that there was some issue with the money, that he let you keep the savings to help you get back on your feet. That was really generous of him." My hand froze on the handle of my basket. He had twisted the story completely, in his version. He was the benevolent hero who had walked away from a crazy woman, leaving her with a pile of cash out of pity. He had turned his defeat into a charitable act. He could not admit he failed to get the money. So he claimed he gave it to me. It was brilliant. It was evil. And it was completely unprovable. "Is that what he said?" I asked. "Well, yeah," Sarah said. "Everyone is really worried about you. Mia, maybe you should reach out to him. Apologize. He might still be willing to talk." I looked at Sarah. I looked at the pity in her eyes. I realized that arguing with her in the produce aisle would only confirm the rumor, if I shouted. "He is a liar. I have spreadsheets. I would look exactly like the unstable, bitter ex-fiancé he had painted me to be. I am doing just fine. Sarah," I said calmly, "enjoy your guacamole." I walked away. I paid for my groceries with a steady hand, but inside, I was shaking. I went home and called Tessa. I told her what Sarah had said. "He is poisoning the well," Tessa said. "He knows he cannot get the money legally, so he is trying to destroy your social capital. He wants you to react. He wants you to post a long, angry rant online so he can point to it and say, 'See, told you she was crazy.'" "I want to scream," I admitted. "I want to print out the bank statements and staple them to his forehead." "Do not," Tessa said. "Do not give him the satisfaction. If you defend yourself against a lie that hasn't been spoken to your face, you look guilty. You have to wait." "Wait for what?" "For the lie to get too big," Tessa said. "He is arrogant, Mia. He will overplay his hand. Right now, he is telling people he gave you the money. Soon, he will get comfortable. He will forget that the truth exists, and that is when we catch him." I understood. It was the same logic I used with teenagers at school. When a student lies, you do not interrupt them. You let them talk. You let them add details. You let them build a story so complex that it eventually collapses under its own weight. Grant was building a castle of lies. He was telling everyone that I was the villain and he was the martyr. He was securing his status within his group by sacrificing mine. I decided to play the long game. I did not text Sarah to correct her. I did not send a mass email to our guest list explaining the financial reality. I let the rumors swirl. I let them think I was hiding in my apartment, crying over a man who was too good for me. In reality, I was not hiding. I was preparing. I opened my laptop. I looked at the receipts folder. It was growing. I had the venue cancellation confirmation. I had the bank audit. Now, I had the demand letter and our legal response. I created a new subfolder. I named it the timeline. I began to document the dates. January 15th, the breakup. January 16th, the demand for liquidity. January 20th, the attempted theft of the venue refund. January 24th, the legal threat. February 2nd, the smear campaign begins. I was building a dossier. Grant thought he was burying me, but he was actually just digging a hole for himself. He was so busy telling stories that he forgot that paper trails do not fade. The following Friday, I received a notification on my phone. It was from a credit monitoring service I had signed up for years ago and largely ignored. Alert new inquiry. I swiped it open. It was a soft pull on my credit report. Someone was checking my score. It could have been routine, but given the timing, it felt specific. Grant was checking to see if I had cracked. He was checking to see if I was in financial distress. He wanted to know if his pressure campaign was working. I smiled. My credit score was 810. It was pristine. It was another number he could not argue with. He wanted a war of words. I was fighting a war of documentation. I closed the laptop and walked to the window. The city lights were flickering on in the distance. Somewhere out there, Grant was probably at a bar, holding a scotch, telling a group of nodding sycophants about how he had narrowly escaped a marriage to a woman who just wasn't executive material. Let him talk. Let him enjoy his moment. Because the thing about lies is that they require constant maintenance. You have to keep telling them, keep polishing them, keep remembering who you told what. The truth. The truth just sits there. It waits. It does not need energy. It does not need a PR strategy. And I was sitting right there with it, waiting for the moment when Grant would walk into a room where he could not control the narrative. I did not know when it would happen, but I knew it would, and when it did, I would not need to say a word. The receipts would do the talking for me. The refund from the Gilded Oak hit my bank account on a Tuesday. $6,400. It was the money Grant had tried to divert. The money he claimed was his because he was the executive and I was the liability. Seeing that number in my ledger did not make me feel rich. It made me feel tired. I looked at the balance and realized that if I stayed in this apartment, staring at the empty space on my finger and the ghost of a wedding dress in the closet, I would suffocate. I did not need a honeymoon. I needed an evacuation. I did not book a flight to Paris. I did not look at the Maldives or the Amalfi Coast, or any of the places Grant used to scroll through on Instagram, talking loudly about exclusive access and concierge service. I wanted the opposite of exclusive. I wanted vast, open, indifferent space. I wanted dirt. I wanted silence. I booked a ticket to Phoenix, rented a small SUV, and drove 2 hours north to Sedona. I rented a small casita specifically because it did not have a lobby. There was no bellhop to judge my luggage. There was no concierge to ask if I was traveling alone for business or pleasure. There was just a keypad on the door, a bed with white linens, and a view of the red rocks that looked like they had been burning for 1,000,000 years, for the first 3 days. I did not speak to a single human being. I woke up at 5 in the morning, not because of an alarm, but because the light hitting the red canyons was too demanding to ignore. I put on my hiking boots, the ones Grant hated because he said they looked clunky, and I walked. I walked the Cathedral Rock Trail. I walked through the dust and the scrub brush. The air in Arizona is dry and thin. It forces you to pay attention to your breathing. In the city, breathing is automatic. You breathe in exhaust and air conditioning and stress without thinking. Here, Every breath felt like a negotiation with the landscape. My legs burned, my lungs worked, and for the first time in 4 years, the noise in my head stopped. Grant was not here. There was no one to tell me that my story about the guidance counselor conference was boring. There was no one to correct my pronunciation of a menu item. There was no one to check my outfit before we left the house to ensure I fit the brand. On the 4th evening, I sat on the patio of my rental. The sun was setting, turning the sky into a bruised masterpiece of violet and burnt orange. I had a glass of wine in my hand. It was a $12 bottle I had bought at a local grocery store. It tasted better than the $300 vintage Grant had ordered at our engagement dinner. I picked up my phone. I had not looked at social media since the breakup. I had been too afraid of the pity, the rumors, the photos of Grant pretending to be unbothered. But the sunset was too beautiful to keep to myself. It felt selfish to hoard this much color. I took a picture, no filters, no angles, just the rocks and the sky. I posted it to my personal account. I did not tag the location. I did not write a paragraph explaining my absence. I wrote 4 words. Some endings are exits. I put the phone down and went inside to take a shower. When I came back 20 minutes later, the screen was lit up like a Christmas tree. The notifications were stacking up. Most were likes from friends I hadn't seen in years, people who probably didn't even know I was engaged. But then came the texts. The first one was from Chloe, the PR agent friend of Grant. Chloe, wow. Beautiful view. Hope you are okay. Just a heads up. The caption is a little aggressive. Do not you think people are talking? I stared at the screen. Aggressive 4 words about a sunset were aggressive. Then came a text from Grant's older sister, Natalie. Natalie had always been nice to me, in a distant, patronizing way. She treated me like a well-meaning intern who wasn't quite ready for a full-time position in the family. Natalie Mia, I saw your post. I know you are hurting, but please remember that Grant is hurting too. Subtweeting him like that is beneath you. He has been very generous regarding the financial split, and I think you owe him some discretion. Let us be fair. Fair, that word again. They were all using the same script. Grant must have briefed them. He must have told them that I was the one holding on to the money, that I was the one dragging his name through the mud. I felt a surge of the old panic. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I wanted to reply. I wanted to type, "He tried to steal the deposit. He demanded half my savings. He is lying to you." I typed the first 3 words, "You do not know." Then I stopped. I looked out the window at the dark silhouette of the mountains. They were massive, silent, and completely unbothered by the opinions of a PR agent named Chloe. If I replied, I was participating. If I defended myself, I was acknowledging that their court had jurisdiction over me. I deleted the draft. I did not block them. That would be a reaction. Instead, I went into my settings and turned on Do Not Disturb. I placed the phone face down on the table. I drank my wine. The silence returned. It was heavier now, but it was mine. For the rest of the trip, I thought about that word Natalie had used, generous, and I thought about the word Grant had used, executive. I remembered a dinner party 2 years ago. We were hosting Grant's colleagues at our apartment. I had spent 2 days cooking. I made a roast chicken, glazed carrots, and a homemade tart. I was proud of it. When we sat down, Grant's boss took a bite and said, "This is delicious, Mia. You are quite the homemaker." It was a compliment, slightly sexist, but well-intentioned. I had smiled and said, "Thank you. I actually find cooking really relaxes me after a long week at the school." Grant had cut in immediately. "Mia manages the administrative side of the guidance department," he said, smoothing over my job title. "She deals with district metrics." He had been ashamed. He was ashamed that I was a counselor who helped teenagers apply for financial aid. He wanted me to sound like an administrator, a bureaucrat, something scalable. I sat there in Sedona, remembering the heat of that shame. I had let him edit me. I had let him take a red pen to my life and cross out the parts he found too ordinary. I realized then that the $19,000 he wanted was the least of what he had tried to take. He had tried to take my delight in my own life. He had tried to convince me that being a woman who earns $61,000 a year, drives a Honda, and likes road trips was a failure. He was wrong. I spent the next 6 days hiking until my feet blistered. I wrote in a notebook. I wrote down the things I liked. I like cheap coffee. I like my job. I like silence. I like not being an executive. I returned to the city on a Sunday night. The flight back was uneventful. I dragged my suitcase up the stairs to my apartment. The air inside was stale, but it smelled like home. It smelled like safety. I did not call Grant. I did not check if he had texted. I unpacked my bag. I put my hiking boots in the closet, but I did not hide them in the back. I left them right by the door, still covered in the red dust of Arizona. I went back to work on Monday. Walking into the high school felt different before. I used to walk in feeling like I was stepping down into a lower world, the world Grant tolerated but did not respect. Today, I walked in and saw it for what it was real. I sat in my office and listened to a sophomore cry about a failed math test. I handed him a tissue. I told him that one test does not define his future. I told him that the world is big and there are many ways to be successful. As I said the words to him, I heard them for myself. I was done with the drama. I was done with the revenge in the traditional sense. I did not want to slash his tires. I did not want to scream at him in a restaurant. I just wanted to be Mia Rogers, guidance counselor. I thought the war was over. I thought that by ignoring his texts and keeping my money, I had won the stalemate. I thought Grant would eventually get bored and move on to a new target, someone else he could mold and drain. I was naive. It was Wednesday evening. I was sitting on my couch, grading papers, with the television playing softly in the background. My laptop was open on the coffee table. A notification popped up in the corner of the screen. It was an email from the credit monitoring service I had checked before I left for Sedona. Subject alert: new account opened. I frowned. I had not applied for anything. I had not bought anything except groceries and gas since I returned. I clicked on the email. Dear customer, we have detected a new trade line on your credit report. Creditor Sapphire Lux Card Services. Opened February 11th. Credit limit $25,000. February 11th. That was 3 days ago. I was in Arizona on February 11th, sitting on a rock, watching a lizard sun itself. I was definitely not opening a luxury credit card. I stared at the screen. I clicked for more details. The address on file for the card was not my apartment. It was an address in the downtown district. 1402 West 4th Street. I knew that address. It was the address of the bachelor pad Grant had moved into after we broke up. He had bragged about it to mutual friends, calling it his transitional penthouse. My stomach turned over. It was not the butterflies of anxiety. It was the cold, hard rock of realization. Grant had not just tried to steal the venue money. He had not just tried to bully me into giving him my savings. He had used my social security number. He had used my name. He had opened a credit line of $25,000 because he had run out of his own money and he felt entitled to mine. He thought I wouldn't notice. He thought I was the scatterbrained creative type he always told me I was. He thought I was too emotional to check the paperwork. I picked up my phone. I looked at the Do Not Disturb icon. I turned it off. I did not call him. I did not text him. I dialed the number for Tessa. Hey, she answered, sounding tired. It is 8 o'clock. Mia, please tell me you are not calling about his sister again. No, I said. My voice was very quiet. Tessa, put down whatever you are doing. What is it? She asked, hearing the change in my tone. He opened a credit card, I said, in my name, sent to his address. There was a silence on the line, a long, heavy silence. Are you sure? Tessa asked. Her voice was no longer the voice of a friend. It was the voice of a lawyer. I am looking at the report right now, I said. Sapphire Lux, 25,000 limit, opened 3 days ago. Okay, Tessa said. Mia, listen to me very carefully. This is no longer a civil dispute. This is not about the breakup. I know, I said. This is identity theft, Tessa said. This is wire fraud. This is a felony. I looked at the screen. I looked at the name, Mia Rogers, next to the address of the man who said I wasn't good enough. What do you want to do? Tessa asked. We can call him. We can scare him into closing it if we file a police report. Mia, this goes nuclear. There is no coming back from that. He could go to jail. He will lose his job. I thought about the red rocks. I thought about the silence. I thought about the text from his sister telling me to be fair. I thought about the way he looked at me in the car when he said, "You do not." He had taken my 4 years. He had tried to take my savings. Now he was trying to take my good name to buy suits he couldn't afford. Mia, Tessa asked. I do not want to call him, I said. Okay, Tessa said. I want to follow the procedure. I said. I want to file the dispute. I want to file the affidavit. I want to let the system handle it. You know what that means for him, Tessa warned. I know, I said. But Tessa. Yeah. I am not doing it to hurt him, I said, and I meant it. I am just doing the paperwork. If the paperwork hurts him, that is not my fault. That is his math. All right, Tessa said. Get your laptop. Let us start the police report. I opened a new tab. Grant Mercer wanted an executive. He wanted someone who made hard decisions. He wanted someone who understood the bottom line. He was about to get exactly what he asked for. The glow of the laptop screen seemed to suck the warmth right out of the room. I sat on my sofa, my legs tucked under me, staring at a digital crime scene. The email from the credit monitoring service was not a glitch. It was a map. I clicked through to the transaction history of the Sapphire Lux card. The account had been open for 72 hours. In that short window, the user had been busy. I looked at the spending. It was a caricature of the life Grant desperately wanted to project. February 11th, Gable and Stearns, Bespoke Clothiers, $3,240. February 12th, The Onyx Room, $614. February 12th, Apex Social Club, initiation fee, $5,000. I looked at the initiation fee, $5,000. Grant had been trying to get into the Apex Club for 2 years. It was a members-only lounge where the city's real executives went to smoke cigars and close deals. He had never applied before because he did not have the liquidity for the upfront cost. Now, apparently, he did, because he was using my credit score to pay for it. I scrolled to the Account Details tab. I needed to see where the card had been sent. The address was listed clearly, 429 Elm Street, apartment 4B. I froze. That was not his new bachelor pad. That was his old condo, the one we had lived in for 3 months at the very beginning of our relationship before we decided it was too small. He had told me he rented it out to a tenant. He told me it was an investment property now. Clearly, there was no tenant. He was staying there, or at least, he was collecting his mail there. He had used an address that was technically linked to his name, but he had attached my social security number to the application. He probably thought it was clever. If anyone asked, he could claim it was a clerical error, a mix-up of files between 2 people who used to live together, but a clerical error does not buy a $3,000 suit. I did not scream. I did not throw the laptop. A strange, icy calm settled over me. This was no longer a breakup. This was no longer a dispute about who paid for the DJ. I reached for my phone, but I did not open the camera to take a selfie. I opened the camera to take evidence. Click, the account summary. Click, the transaction list. Click, the address verification. I saved the photos to the receipts folder, then backed them up to a cloud drive. Then I saved them again to an external hard drive. Then, I picked up my phone and dialed the number on the back of my own debit card to get through to the bank's fraud department. Loss prevention. This is Kevin. Hi, Kevin, I said. My voice was steady, the same tone I used when explaining a lockdown drill to a classroom of students. My name is Mia Rogers. I am calling because I just received a notification of a credit card opened in my name that I did not authorize. Okay, Ms. Rogers, Kevin said, typing in the background. Let me pull up your file. I see the inquiry here. Sapphire Lux. That is the one. And you are saying you did not apply for this? I did not. I said, I am currently looking at the transaction history. There is a charge for $5,000 to the Apex Social Club. I am a high school guidance counselor. Kevin, I do not frequent private cigar clubs. I see, Kevin said. Okay, we need to act on this immediately. I am going to flag this account as fraudulent. We will freeze the card instantly so no more charges can go through. Thank you, I said. What happens next? We will launch an internal investigation, Kevin explained. We will send you an affidavit of fraud. You will need to sign it and return it. We will also notify the credit bureaus to remove the hard inquiry from your report. However, Ms. Rogers, yes. Given the amount charged over $8,000 in 3 days, this is a significant theft. We usually recommend that victims of identity theft file a police report. It helps with the dispute process. I understand, I said. Do you know who might have done this? Kevin asked. Usually, it is someone with access to your personal information, a family member, a partner. I looked at the transaction for the suit. I knew exactly what suit it was. It was likely navy blue, Italian wool, with a peaked lapel. Grant had been talking about it for months. I have a suspicion, I said carefully, but I will let the investigation handle it. Understood. I have frozen the account. You are safe for tonight. I hung up. I immediately went to the websites of the 3 major credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. I placed a freeze on my credit files at all 3. I generated new PINs. I changed the passwords to my email, my bank, and my cloud storage. I turned on 2-factor authentication for everything. I was locking the doors. I was boarding up the windows. Then, I called Tessa. Mia, she answered on the first ring. Did you do it? Did you check? I checked, I said. He spent $8,000. Tessa, in 72 hours. Oh my God, Tessa breathed. What did he buy? A suit, a dinner, and a club membership. He bought a club membership with a stolen identity. Tessa sounded stunned. That is pathologically arrogant. He literally left a paper trail with his name on it at the club. He thinks he is untouchable, I said. He thinks that because we were engaged, he can claim it was a misunderstanding. He thinks he can say I gave him permission. Mia, Tessa's voice went hard. Listen to me. This is not petty drama anymore. This is not he said, she said. This is wire fraud. This is identity theft. These are felonies. I know. If you pursue this, Tessa said, if you file the police report and the fraud affidavit, the bank will go after him, the prosecutor might go after him. This isn't just getting your money back. This is handcuffs. This is a criminal record. He could lose his job. He will definitely lose his securities licenses. I sat in the silence of my apartment. I looked at the dark window. Tessa was asking me if I was ready to destroy him. For a moment, I hesitated. I remembered the Grant I had met 4 years ago. He had been charming, ambitious, and seemingly kind. I remembered the way he used to bring me coffee in bed. I remembered the Christmas we spent with his parents. If I filed this report, I was nuking all of that. I was taking a man I had loved and turning him into a criminal defendant. It felt heavy. It felt cruel. Was it worth it? Could I just cancel the card? Pay off the $8,000 myself to avoid the mess, and just disappear? It would cost me money, but it would save me the guilt of ruining a life. I almost closed the laptop. I almost decided to be nice, but then, the memory hit me. I was back in the car. I saw the dashboard lights. I saw his profile. Cold and sneering. All my friends are marrying executives. He hadn't just broken up with me. He had assessed my value as a human being and decided I was insufficient. And because he viewed me as insufficient, he believed I was also powerless. He believed he could use my name, my credit, and my reputation as a resource for his own ambition because I was too weak to stop him. He was counting on my hesitation. He was banking on my empathy. If I didn't file the report, I wasn't being kind. I was being exactly what he said. I was a doormat. If I stayed silent, I was giving him permission to do this to the next woman. I was validating his belief that he could take whatever he wanted without consequence. I sat up straighter. "Mia," Tessa asked softly, "are you there?" "I am here," I said. "What do you want to do?" I looked at the transaction for the Apex Social Club. He wanted to be a big shot. He wanted to play by the rules of the elite. Well, the first rule of the elite is that you do not leave fingerprints. "I am filing the report," I said. "Okay," Tessa said. "I will help you draft the narrative for the police, but you need to do the identity theft affidavit on the government site right now. That is the trigger." "I am on the page," I said. I opened the browser to identitytheft.gov. I clicked Get Started. "Which statement best describes your situation?" I selected. "Someone used my information to open a credit card account." "Did you authorize this account?" I selected. "No." "Do you know the suspect?" I paused. My finger hovered over the mouse. I clicked Yes. I typed in his name, Grant Mercer. I typed in his address, 429 Elm Street. I filled out every field. I attached the screenshots of the transactions. I attached the timeline. I was meticulous. I was thorough. I was the guidance counselor filling out the final report card for a student who had failed every single test of character. When I reached the final page, there was a button that said, Submit Affidavit. I took a deep breath. This was the point of no return. Once I clicked this, the machinery of the state would start turning. It would not stop because I felt nostalgic. It would not stop because he said sorry. It was a system, cold and blind. Grant wanted an executive decision. Here it was. I clicked Submit. The screen refreshed. "Thank you. Your report has been filed. Reference number 849201. I closed the laptop. It was done. I did not feel happy. I did not feel a rush of victory. I felt a profound sense of finality. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. My hands were steady. Grant Mercer was currently sitting in a club, wearing a suit he bought with my name, drinking a scotch he paid for with my credit, telling his friends how he had upgraded his life. He had no idea that the bill was already in the mail. And this time, he was the only one who would be paying it. The silence following my submission of the fraud affidavit was not empty. It was heavy. It was the kind of atmospheric pressure that precedes a storm. I went about my days with a strange sense of duality. On the surface, I was Mia Rogers, the diligent career counselor who arrived at 7:30 in the morning with a travel mug of oatmeal. Underneath, I was the operator of a secret machinery that was slowly grinding a man's life into dust. I expected the next blow to come from the bank or the police. I did not expect it to come from inside Grant's own fortress. It was Tuesday evening. I was sitting at my kitchen island, reviewing a slide deck for a presentation I was scheduled to give at the district office. My phone chimed with a notification from LinkedIn. I frowned. LinkedIn was usually for recruiters or former students asking for recommendations. I opened the app. The message was from Elise Vance. Elise was the vice president at the pharmaceutical company, the wife of Jason, the woman who had sat across from me at that final steakhouse dinner and talked about skiing in Zurich while I picked at my salad. Elise intimidated me. She was sharp, unsentimental, and wore blazers that cost more than my first car. We had never exchanged a single direct message in 4 years. Elise Vance. Mia, are you free to talk? Not on here. Text me. She included her personal cell number. My heart did not race, but my stomach tightened. Was this another attack? Was she coming to tell me that I was ruining Grant's reputation and that I needed to back off? I picked up my phone. I typed the number. Mia. Hi, Elise. It is Mia. The 3 dots of the typing bubble appeared instantly. Elise. Thanks for replying. Look, I am going to be direct because I do not have time for games. I think something is off. I stared at the screen. Off. That was a mild word for a situation involving identity theft. But I let her continue. Elise Grant came over for drinks last night with Jason. He was manic. He is telling everyone that he is engaged again. To a director of operations at a tech firm. He says they have been seeing each other for 6 months. I let out a short, dry laugh. 6 months. 6 months ago, Grant and I were picking out napkin colors for our reception. Mia. I am not surprised. Elise? He moves fast. Elise. It is not just that. He is telling people that the reason you two broke up is that you embezzled the wedding fund. He says you took $40,000 of his money and vanished. He told Jason he is considering suing you, but he does not want to ruin your life because you are fragile. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. Embezzled. The projection was so absolute, it was almost impressive. He was accusing me of the exact crime he had attempted to commit. Mia, Elise, that is not true. I have the bank statements. Elise, I know. The text sat there for a moment. I know. Elise, I know because I manage a P&L for a living. Mia, I know what a liar sounds like. Grant's timeline is messy. He says he paid for everything, but last year he asked Jason for a bridge loan because he was illiquid. It does not add up. I felt a sudden, unexpected wave of gratitude. I had assumed these people were all the same shallow, status-obsessed clones, but Elise was smart. She was watching the math, not the show. Elise. Also, there is this. I was going through some videos on my phone from the holiday party at our house in December. I was recording Jason's toast, but the camera was panning. Grant was standing near the bar with Brad. I think you should hear this. An audio file appeared in the chat. It was short, only 12 seconds long. I pressed play. The sound was tinny. I heard the clinking of glass, the murmur of a crowd, and Jason's booming voice in the distance saying something about record profits. Then, closer to the microphone, a voice cut through. It was unmistakable. It was Grant's smooth, confident baritone, slightly slurred by scotch. It does not matter if she signs the prenup or not. Brad, the savings account is a loop. I put nothing in. I take half out. It is leverage. I will get my share one way or another. The audio cut off. I sat in my kitchen, the silence of the room amplifying the echo of his voice in my head. I will get my share one way or another. December. He had said this in December. We were still engaged. We were still planning the wedding. He was smiling at me across the room, holding my hand, playing the part of the devoted fiancé, and all the while, he was standing by the bar, telling his friend that I was nothing more than a financial instrument he intended to liquidate. It was premeditated, the demand letter, the attempt to steal the venue refund, the credit card fraud. None of it was a crime of passion or a reaction to heartbreak. It was the plan. I saved the audio file. I saved it to the receipts folder. I saved it to the cloud. Mia. Thank you. Elise, why are you sending this to me, Elise? Because I hate bad math, and I hate men who think they are smarter than the women they are trying to rob. Watch your back. Mia. He is desperate, and a desperate man is dangerous. Mia. I appreciate it. Elise. Don't mention my name. I have to work with these people, but you needed to know. The conversation ended. I put the phone down. I did not post the audio recording on Instagram. I did not send it to Grant with a gotcha caption. That is what the old Mia might have wanted to do, scream the truth from the rooftops. The new Mia understood the value of ammunition. You do not fire your best shot at the sky just to hear the bang. You keep it in the chamber. This recording proved intent. If this ever went to a criminal court, this 12-second clip destroyed his defense that he was just confused about the finances. He knew exactly what he was doing. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. The net was tightening. The next morning, I had to compartmentalize. I had to put Grant and his Machiavellian schemes in a box and focus on my own reality. I drove to the district headquarters of the public school system. I was there to present the Pathways Project, a new initiative I had designed to help students from low-income families navigate trade school apprenticeships. Not just university applications. It was a big room. There were 20 people there, district superintendents, principals, and a few local business leaders. I wore my best suit. It was not a $3,000 Italian bespoke suit. It was from a department store, bought on sale. but it fit me perfectly. I stood at the podium. I connected my laptop. I did not shake. For 45 minutes, I spoke. I talked about data. I talked about the gap between student potential and opportunity. I answered questions about budget allocation and long-term metrics. I was articulate, passionate, and undeniably competent when I finished. There was a pause, and then genuine applause, not the polite, razor-sharp applause of Grant's dinner parties, but the solid, heavy applause of people who respect work. The director of student services, a woman named Dr. Aris, approached me afterward. "Mia," she said, shaking my hand firmly, "that was exceptional. You have a vision that we have been missing. We want you to lead the pilot program. It comes with a title change and a stipend increase." "Thank you, Dr. Aris," I said, smiling. "I would be honored." "You have a future here," she said. "A real one." I walked out of that building feeling 10 feet tall. I checked my phone in the parking lot. There was a text from Grant. It must have been triggered by something. Maybe the credit card company had finally called him. Maybe the police had knocked on his door to follow up on the identity theft report. Or maybe he just sensed, with the instinct of a parasite, that his host was thriving without him. "Grant, let us meet. Like adults. No lawyers. Just you and me." I stared at the message. No lawyers. That was the tell. If he had a leg to stand on, he would have brought a lawyer. If he was innocent, he would have hidden behind legal counsel. No lawyers meant he knew he was in trouble. No lawyers meant he wanted to use the one weapon he thought still worked his charm. He wanted to manipulate me. He wanted to sit across from me, look deep into my eyes, and convince me that I was overreacting, that we could fix this, that I should withdraw the fraud report for the sake of what we had. He wanted to negotiate a surrender. My thumb hovered over the delete button. I did not have to go. I was safe. I had the law on my side. I had Elise's recording. I had my job. I could block him and let the detectives handle the rest. But there was a part of me, the part that had spent 4 years shrinking, that needed to see this. I needed to see him, not as the terrifying executive who controlled my social life, but as he really was. I needed to see the man who stole my identity because he couldn't afford a club membership. I needed to see him small. I needed to look him in the eye and let him see that the Mia he knew was dead. I typed a response. "Mia Starbucks on 4th and Main. Tomorrow, 5:30 in the afternoon." It was a public place. It was busy. It was safe. And crucially, it was cheap. I wasn't going to meet him at a wine bar. I wasn't going to play his game of atmosphere. "Grant, fine. See you there." I threw the phone on the passenger seat of my car. I started the engine. The radio was playing a pop song about heartbreak, but I turned it off. I preferred the hum of the engine. I drove home thinking about the chessboard. Grant thought this meeting was his chance to turn the tables. He thought he could talk his way out of a felony. He thought he was walking into a negotiation. He was wrong. I wasn't going there to negotiate. I wasn't going there to get closure. I wasn't even going there to hear his apology. I was going there to verify the target. I wanted to see the fear in his eyes. I wanted to confirm that the man who had told me I didn't fit was finally realizing that he was the one who didn't belong in my world anymore. I went home and prepared for the meeting like I had prepared for my presentation. I did not pick out a sexy revenge dress. I wore my work clothes. I wore the clothes of a woman who had a job, a life, and a credit score that belonged to her. I opened my laptop one last time that night. I checked the receipts folder, audio the confession, document the fraud affidavit, email the venue refund, photo, the credit card charges. I had everything. Grant Mercer was bringing words to a gunfight, and tomorrow, at 5:30, he was going to find out that his words were blanks. I arrived at the Starbucks on 4th and Main 10 minutes early. It was 5:20 in the afternoon, and the coffee shop was in the chaotic throes of the post-work rush. The air smelled of burnt espresso and rain. It was loud. An espresso machine shrieked every 30 seconds, and a group of college students were debating philosophy at the table next to me. I chose a small, round table in the center of the room. I did not sit in the back corner. I did not want privacy. I wanted witnesses. I bought a black coffee for $3.50. I placed it on the table, took a sip, and waited. At exactly 5:32, the door opened. Grant walked in. He was wearing the camel-colored coat he had bought to match a pair of boots I gave him last Christmas. He scanned the room, his expression tight, his jaw set in a line of irritation. He looked like a man who was lowering himself to be there. A man doing a distasteful chore, but he was not alone. Walking in behind him was Natalie, his older sister. I felt a flash of cold anger. The text had said, "Just you and me." He had brought reinforcements. He had brought a family member to shame me, to create a 2-against-1 dynamic where I would feel outnumbered and pressured into submission. It was a classic bully tactic. He wanted me to feel like a naughty child being called into the principal's office with a parent present. They spotted me. Grant said something to Natalie, and they marched over to my table. Natalie looked uncomfortable. She was holding her purse tightly against her side, her eyes darting around the crowded, unglamorous shop. This was not the kind of venue the Mercers usually frequented. Grant pulled out a chair and sat down without saying hello. Natalie sat next to him. "Mia," Natalie said, offering a tight, pained smile. "It is good to see you." "Hello, Natalie," I said calmly. Then I looked at Grant. "I thought we agreed no lawyers. I did not realize you were bringing a chaperone." "Natalie is here as a mediator," Grant said. His voice was low, but it vibrated with suppressed rage. "Because clearly, you and I cannot communicate without you escalating things to insane levels." "Insane levels," I repeated. I did not ask a question. I just mirrored his words. "You know exactly what I'm talking about," Grant snapped. He leaned forward, invading my space. "You filed a police report. Seriously, Mia, you sent detectives to my door. You are ruining my life." He said it with such conviction. In his mind, the arrival of the police was not the consequence of his actions. It was an act of aggression on my part. "I am trying to close a round of funding for a client," Grant hissed. "Do you know what it looks like to have a fraud investigation flagged on my background check? You are jeopardizing my career over a breakup." Natalie placed a hand on Grant's arm. "Grant, calm down. Let us just talk to her." She turned to me, her face arranging itself into a mask of sympathetic concern. "Mia, look, we know you are hurt. We know the engagement ending was a shock, but retaliation isn't the answer. Grant tells me you are disputing charges that were clearly authorized expenses for the transition." I looked at Natalie. She had no idea. He had lied to her too. He had told her that I had approved the spending, that I was just reneging on a deal out of spite. "Authorized expenses," I said slowly. "Is that what he told you?" "He said you agreed to help him set up his new place since he let you keep the house fund." Natalie said, "He said you gave him the card information." I looked at Grant. He refused to meet my eyes. He was looking at the table, his mouth a thin line of defiance. "Grant," I said. My voice was level, quiet, and absolutely steady. "Did you tell your sister that I authorized you to buy a $3,000 suit at Gable & Stearns?" "It was implied," Grant burst out. "You walked away with $40,000 of our money. I needed a wardrobe for the new job search. It was equitable distribution. Mia, you know that." "I did not walk away with our money," I said, ignoring his emotional spin and sticking to the transcript of reality. "I retained the savings account that was 97% funded by my payroll deposits. You demanded $19,000 you never deposited. When I refused, you tried to intercept the venue refund. When that failed, my credit report took a hit for $25,000. Natalie frowned. She shifted in her seat. The word credit seemed to snag her attention. "Wait," Natalie said. "Credit Grant told me it was a joint credit card you two already had." Grant stiffened. "It is a detail. Nat, does it matter whose name was primary?" "It matters," I said. I reached into my bag. I did not pull out a weapon. I pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was the printout of the account opening summary from Sapphire Lux. I placed it on the table, facing Natalie. This account was opened on February 11th, I said. I was in Sedona, Arizona, on February 11th. I have the flight logs and the rental car receipts to prove it. This application was submitted from an IP address in this city. I pointed to a specific line on the paper. Natalie, look at the applicant name, I said. She looked down. Mia Rogers. Now, look at the mailing address, I said. Natalie read the address, her brow furrowed. That is Grant's old condo on Elm Street. Exactly, I said. I looked at Grant. He was no longer leaning forward. He was leaning back, crossing his arms, trying to look bored, but a vein in his temple was throbbing. Grant, I said, why was the card with my name on it mailed to your address? The question hung in the air between us, heavier than the smell of coffee. It was a simple question. There was no answer that did not admit guilt. If I had opened it, I would have sent it to my apartment. If it was a joint card, it would have come to our shared address. The only reason for it to go to his bachelor pad was if the applicant wanted to hide the physical card from me. Grant did not answer. He scoffed. He looked at the ceiling. Oh, come on, he said. You are obsessed with the logistics. You are missing the big picture. The logistics are the crime. Grant, I said, identity theft is not a difference of opinion. It is a felony. It is not theft if we were practically married, Grant shouted. A few people at nearby tables turned to look. Grant didn't care. He was cornered. I was building a life for us, he yelled. I made sacrifices, and now you are treating me like a stranger because I bought a suit. You are petty. Mia, that is your problem. You have always been petty. Grant, Natalie said, her voice sharp. Did you sign her name? Grant whipped his head around to look at his sister. Whose side are you on? I am on the side of not going to prison, Natalie said. She looked at the paper again. She looked at the list of transactions I had stapled to the back. The Apex Club, you charged the initiation fee to this. I needed to network, Grant said. I did it for the potential income. It would have paid her back 10 times over. But you did not ask her, Natalie said. It was not a question. It was a realization. Grant turned back to me. His face was red. The mask of the cool, collected executive was gone. In its place was a petulant child who had been caught with his hand in the jar. You think you are so smart, he sneered, sitting there with your little printouts. But you know what? You are pathetic. You are holding on to this because it is the only way you can stay relevant in my life. I took a sip of my coffee. It was cold now. I do not want to be relevant in your life, Grant, I said. I want to be absent from your debt. You are ruining me. He slammed his hand on the table. The coffee in my cup rippled. Over $8,000 I make that in a month I could write you a check right now. Then why didn't you? I asked. He stopped. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. If you have the money, I continued, my voice soft but cutting. Why did you need to use my social security number? Why did you need to steal my credit score? He stared at me. The truth was right there, sitting on his tongue, but he couldn't swallow it. He couldn't admit that he was broke. He couldn't admit that his lifestyle was a house of cards built on debt and image. You do not get it, he spat out. You never got it. You are small. Mia, you are small-minded. You are just... He paused. He was searching for a word that would hurt me. He wanted to call me a loser, a nobody, a bore, but he looked at Natalie, who was staring at him with a look of horror, and he hesitated. He realized that any insult he threw would only make him look worse. He faltered. You are just... He trailed off. Just someone you thought wouldn't notice details. I finished the sentence for him. I said it without malice. It was just a fact. You thought because I was a guidance counselor, because I drove a Honda, because I never interrupted you at dinner parties, that I was stupid, I said. You thought I was the soft landing. You thought you could take what you wanted and I would just cry and let you... Grant looked away. He couldn't hold my gaze. I looked at Natalie. She was sitting very still. She was looking at her brother, really looking at him, perhaps for the first time in years. She was seeing the entitlement, the cruelty, the profound lack of integrity. She was realizing that the stories he had told her about me, about how I was crazy, unstable, jealous, were all projections. She looked up at me. Her eyes were wet. "Mia," she whispered, "I did not know." "I know you didn't," I said. "But now you do." I stood up. I did not make a scene. I did not throw my coffee in his face. I simply gathered my purse. I reached into my wallet and pulled out a $5 bill. I placed it on the table next to the printout of the fraud evidence. "For the coffee," I said. "I assume you are illiquid at the moment?" Grant flinched as if I had slapped him. I looked down at him one last time. He looked smaller than I remembered. The camel coat looked like a costume. The anger in his eyes was just fear masked as arrogance. "The police have the same file," I said. "The bank has the affidavit. The fraud investigation is active. If you want to discuss a repayment plan or a plea deal, do not call me." I paused, letting the finality of the moment settle over the table. "Any further contact goes through counsel," I said. I turned and walked away. I walked through the crowded coffee shop, past the students debating philosophy, past the line of people waiting for lattes. I pushed open the glass door and stepped out onto the street. The rain had stopped. The air was cool and clean. I did not look back. If I had, I would have seen Grant Mercer sitting in a plastic chair, silenced by his own sister, staring at a $5 bill that represented more financial honesty than he had shown in 4 years. I would have seen a man who had spent his whole life trying to control the room, finally realizing that the room had moved on without him. But I did not need to see it. I could feel it. I walked to my car, got in, and drove away. I did not drive to a victory party. I drove to the grocery store. I needed milk. I needed eggs. I had a life to live, and for the first time in a very long time, it was entirely, wonderfully mine. The dialogue in the coffee shop was the end of the emotional story. Grant was no longer a monster under my bed. He was just a defendant in a case number. And I was just Mia. And that was enough. 3 weeks after I left Grant staring at a $5 bill in a coffee shop, an envelope arrived at my desk at the Brookridge Student Success Center. It was made of heavy cream-colored cardstock with gold foil lettering. It was an invitation to the annual Skyline Gala, a fundraising event hosted by a consortium of local tech companies to support educational initiatives. In the past, I would have attended this event as Grant's +1. I would have spent 3 weeks stressing over a dress that met his approval. I would have stood silently by his side while he networked, holding his drink while he shook hands, smiling until my cheeks ached. This time, the invitation was addressed to Ms. Mia Rogers, Project Lead, Pathways Initiative. I was not a guest. I was an honoree. The event was held at the Lake Haven Wharf Hotel, a venue that smelled of old money and salt water. The ballroom was a cavern of crystal chandeliers and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. I arrived at 7 o'clock. I was not wearing a revenge dress. I was not wearing something backless or slid up to my thigh to make Grant regret his choices. I wore a tailored navy silk jumpsuit that was comfortable, elegant, and entirely mine. I wore my hair down. I wore the shoes I liked, the ones that did not pinch my toes. I walked into the room and felt a sensation I had never experienced in this setting before. I felt like I belonged. I was not here to impress anyone. I was here because I had done the work. I spotted Grant 20 minutes into the cocktail hour. It was impossible to miss him. He was standing near the center of the room, holding court with a group of men in tuxedos. He looked frantic. His smile was too wide. His gestures were too large. He was performing. Standing next to him was a woman who could only be the director he had bragged about. She was tall, striking, and wearing a silver gown that looked like liquid metal. But she did not look happy. She looked exhausted. Her posture was rigid, and she kept checking her watch. I did not approach them. I went to the bar, ordered a sparkling water with lime, and began talking to a district superintendent about the grant money we needed for the vocational program. At 8 o'clock, the lights dimmed. The presentation began. The master of ceremonies took the stage. He spoke about the future of the city, about the need to bridge the gap between education and employment. "Tonight," the MC said, his voice booming over the speakers, "we want to highlight a new program that has already placed 50 students into high-paying apprenticeships in just 3 months. Please welcome the architect of the Pathways Initiative, Ms. Mia Rogers." The spotlight hit me. I walked up the stairs to the stage. The applause was loud. It was real. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw the tech CEOs, the bankers, the philanthropists, and in the middle of the third row, I saw Grant Mercer. His face was a portrait of total confusion. He had his drink halfway to his mouth. He was staring at me as if I were a ghost. Beside him, the director was clapping enthusiastically, leaning forward, clearly interested in what I had to say. I gave my speech. It was short. I spoke about dignity. I spoke about how every student deserves a career that sustains them, not just a job that pays the bills. I spoke about financial literacy and the power of owning your own future. When I finished, the room stood up. I walked off the stage and was immediately surrounded. People wanted to shake my hand. They wanted to know how to fund the program. They gave me business cards. And then, Grant pushed his way through the circle. He had the director in tow, gripping her elbow a little too tightly. "Mia," Grant said, his voice overly loud, trying to reclaim familiarity. "Wow, I had no idea you were speaking. You kept that quiet." He was trying to frame it as if we were still close, as if my success was a cute secret I had kept from him. "Hello, Grant," I said pleasantly. "You know, I was just telling Vanessa here," Grant said, gesturing to the woman, "that I always encouraged you to take the lead. It is great to see you finally listening to my advice." The audacity was breathtaking. He was trying to take credit for my career in real time. I turned to Vanessa. I extended my hand. "Hi, I am Mia," I said. "Vanessa," she said, shaking my hand firmly. "I am the Director of Operations at Kinetics. That speech was incredible. We have been trying to solve the talent pipeline issue for years." "Grant tells me you are doing amazing things at Kinetics," I said politely. Vanessa let out a dry, humorless laugh. She looked at Grant with a flash of irritation. "Is that what he says?" "Actually, my department is being dissolved next month. We are in the middle of a massive restructure. I have been firing people all week. Honestly, I did not even want to come tonight, but Grant insisted it would be good for my brand to be seen." I saw the flicker of panic in Grant's eyes. He had sold Vanessa as a trophy, a high-powered executive to replace the lowly guidance counselor. But Vanessa was a real person with real problems, and she had just exposed his narrative as a sham. "Babe," Grant said, his voice tight, "do not bore Mia with office politics. We are here to celebrate." "I am not bored," I said, looking at Vanessa with genuine empathy. "That sounds incredibly stressful. Vanessa, layoffs are heavy." "They are," Vanessa said, softening. "It is nice to meet someone who gets it. Grant keeps telling me to just manifest abundance, which is not helpful when you are staring at severance spreadsheets." Grant looked like he wanted to vanish. His two worlds were colliding. The downgrade ex-fiancé was being celebrated on stage, and the upgrade new girlfriend was talking about severance packages. But the night was not done with him yet. A man in a black suit with an earpiece approached our small circle. I recognized him. He was one of the event organizers, specifically the one who handled the high-tier donations and table purchases. He looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Mercer?" the man asked. "Yes." Grant straightened his tie, looking relieved to have an interruption. "How can I help you, great event? By the way." "Sir, could I speak with you privately for a moment?" the man asked. "Anything you have to say. You can say in front of the ladies," Grant said expansively. He was trying to regain control, trying to look like the big donor. Is this about the platinum table upgrade I told you to put it on the card? The organizer winced. He glanced at me, then at Vanessa, then back at Grant. Actually, sir, that is the problem, the organizer said. We attempted to run the card you provided for the $5,000 donation and the table fee. It was declined. Grant's face went pale. That is impossible. Run it again. We did, sir, the organizer said. The terminal gave us a specific error code. It says card reported lost or stolen, fraud alert. And the organizer hesitated. And what? Grant demanded, sweat starting to bead on his forehead. Well, sir, the card is in the name of a Ms. Mia Rogers, the organizer said. And since Miss Rogers is standing right here, and we have her on file as a guest of the foundation, the system flagged the mismatch immediately. The silence that followed was absolute. The music seemed to stop. The clinking of glasses faded away. I looked at Grant. He was frozen. He had tried to use the Sapphire Lux card. He had tried to use the card he opened in my name to pay for his table at this gala, to show off to his new girlfriend, assuming that I would not notice the charge until the end of the month. He did not know I had frozen the account 3 weeks ago. He did not know he was walking around with a piece of plastic that was essentially a police evidence tag. Vanessa turned to look at Grant. Her expression shifted from exhaustion to sharp, piercing clarity. Grant, she said. Her voice was very quiet. Why is your ex-fiancé's name on the card you used to pay for our dinner? It is a mistake, Grant stammered. His hands were shaking. It is a joint corporate account. From when we were partners, it is an administrative error. We were never partners. Grant, I said. I did not shout. I did not sound angry. I sounded like a witness testifying to a simple fact. I filed a police report for identity theft on February 14th, I said. Looking at the organizer, that card was opened fraudulently without my consent. If you swipe it again, the terminal will automatically notify the police. The organizer stepped back, looking at Grant with undisguised suspicion. I see. Mr. Mercer, we are going to need another form of payment for the table, immediately, or I will have to ask security to escort you out. Grant looked at me. His eyes were wide, filled with a mix of hatred and terror. He reached out, trying to grab my arm, trying to pull me into a conspiracy. Mia, he hissed. Fix this. Tell him it is a misunderstanding. Do not do this to me here. I took a step back. I did not let him touch me. I cannot fix it, Grant, I said. I did not decline the card. The fraud department did. Vanessa stepped away from him. She looked at the organizer. I am not with him, she said clearly. I am leaving. Do not put anything on my tab. Vanessa, wait, Grant called out, spinning around. But before he could chase her, my phone rang. It was loud. I pulled it out of my clutch. The screen said Tessa. I answered it. Mia, Tessa said, her voice crisp and professional. I just got off the phone with the detective. They pulled the surveillance footage from the ATM where he tried to take a cash advance last week, and the credit bureau just confirmed the address history match. Okay, I said. They are issuing a warrant. Mia, Tessa said. They are looking for him. If you know where he is, you need to tell me. I looked at Grant. He was standing in the middle of the ballroom, red-faced, holding a declined credit card, watching his director girlfriend walk out the door while the event organizer tapped his foot impatiently. He had wanted to be the center of attention. He had wanted to be an executive. Now, he was finally the most important person in the room, but for all the wrong reasons. He is at the Lake Haven Wharf Hotel, I said into the phone, my voice clear enough for Grant to hear. But I do not think he will be staying long. Grant heard me. He heard the word warrant. The color drained from his face completely. He did not argue. He did not try to negotiate. For the first time in his life, Grant Mercer stopped talking. He turned and walked fast toward the exit, abandoning the organizer, abandoning the bill, abandoning the last shred of his dignity. I watched him go. The organizer looked at me apologetically. Ms. Rogers, I am so sorry. I had no idea. It is not your fault, I said. He has a way of making people believe things that aren't true. Is there anything we can do? He asked. Yes, I said. You can give his table to the student volunteers. They are hungry, and they actually deserve a seat. I turned back to the room. The party was still going. The champagne was still flowing. I took a sip of my sparkling water. I had come here to present a project about building honest futures. I ended up dismantling a dishonest past. I checked my watch. It was 9 o'clock. The night was young, but my work here was done. The aftermath of a storm is not loud. It is not chaotic. It is strangely, beautifully bureaucratic. 3 days after the gala at the Lake Haven Wharf Hotel, I sat in a small, gray interview room at the main police precinct. I was not there to scream accusations or demand justice with tears in my eyes. I was there to sign 3 pieces of paper. Across from me sat Detective Miller. He was a tired man who had seen too many cases of domestic fraud to be shocked by Grant Mercer. He pushed the final affidavit across the metal table. This is the confirmation that you did not authorize the account opening, Miller said. And this is the formal request to prosecute for identity theft and wire fraud. I picked up the pen. The ink was black. Once you sign this, Miller said, looking me in the eye, the bank takes over the civil recovery, and the district attorney takes over the criminal case. It is out of your hands. There is no taking it back because you feel sorry for him. I thought about Grant standing in the ballroom, trying to make me look small while he paid for his ego with my credit rating. I thought about the text from his sister telling me to be fair. I thought about the $19,200 he had demanded as his share of a life he never contributed to. I do not feel sorry for him, I said. I feel responsible for the truth. I signed my name, Mia Rogers. The sound of the pen scratching against the paper was the loudest thing in the room. Okay, Miller said, pulling the file back. The Sapphire Lux card is officially closed. The $25,000 balance has been removed from your liability column. The credit bureaus have been notified to scrub the inquiry. You are clear, Ms. Rogers. And Grant? I asked. Mr. Mercer surrendered himself this morning, Miller said casually, as if talking about the weather. He came in with a lawyer. He is currently being processed. He will be released on bail. But given the paper trail you provided, the IP addresses, the mailing address, the video from the ATM, he's looking at a plea deal. He will likely lose his securities license. Felony fraud convictions tend to be a career killer in the finance world. I nodded. It wasn't a cheer. It wasn't a fist pump. It was just a fact. Grant wanted to be an executive. Now, he was a liability. I walked out of the station and into the sunlight. I checked my credit score app. It had already updated. The dip caused by the hard inquiry was gone. My score was back to 810. The system worked. If you had the receipts, the social fallout was swift and brutal. High society does not tolerate embarrassment, and Grant had committed the cardinal sin he had been caught being broke publicly. I heard through the grapevine, mostly from Elise, who was now texting me regularly, that Vanessa had not even waited for the police report. The morning after the gala, she had blocked Grant on every platform. She didn't send a long breakup letter. She simply issued a statement to her own social circle that she had been misled regarding Mr. Mercer's circumstances and was focusing on her career. She didn't want to be a character in his tragedy. She exited stage left, but the most surprising call came on a Thursday evening. I was at home, reorganizing my bookshelf, finally throwing away the bridal magazines I had kept out of habit. My phone rang. It was Natalie. I hesitated. I didn't want another lecture about fairness, but I answered. Hello, Natalie. Mia. Her voice sounded small, broken. I wanted to call. Okay, I said. I was at the arraignment today, she said. I heard the charges. I saw the evidence list. Mia. He used my parents' address for a previous loan application too. I did not know. I know you didn't, I said gently. I am so sorry, Natalie said, and I could hear the tears she was holding back. I told you to be fair. I told you that you were being difficult. I was so sure that he was the victim because he is my brother, and he always told us he was doing so well. Grant is very good at telling stories, I said. He almost made me believe them too. You saved yourself, Natalie said. I am glad you did. I just wanted you to know that no one in the family blames you. We are just sad. We are just really sad. Thank you, Natalie, I said. I appreciate that. I hung up. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt a quiet peace. The gaslighting was over. The people who had looked at me with judgment were finally seeing the reality I had been living in for months. The final loose end was the venue, with Grant facing charges. The Gilded Oak stopped playing games. Jessica, the coordinator, emailed me directly. Dear Mia, we have processed the full cancellation. The refund of $6,400 has been wired to the originating account ending in 8801. We have noted the file to reject any third-party claims. Best of luck. I checked my banking app. The money was there. I looked at the total in my savings. The $38,400 was still safe, plus the $6,400 from the venue, plus the money I had saved in the last 3 months by not paying for Grant's dry cleaning, Grant's dinners, and Grant's image. I had nearly $50,000. It wasn't a fortune to a billionaire, but to me, it was freedom. The next week, life moved forward, not the life Grant had planned for me, but the life I had chosen. I was sitting in my new office at the district headquarters. The Pathways project had been greenlit for a full rollout, and I was now the district coordinator. The pay raise was significant, 12%, but the real reward was the work. I was reviewing site plans for a new vocational training center we were building in partnership with the city. There was a knock on my door. Come in, I said. A man walked in. He was holding a roll of blueprints and a coffee cup. He looked to be about 35, with messy hair and sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He didn't look like a model. He looked like a person who worked for a living. Mia Rogers, he asked. That is me. I am Miles Bennett, he said, extending a hand. Community planning. I am the liaison for the new center. Doctor, Aris told me you are the one who actually understands the data behind the student placement. I try, I said, shaking his hand. His grip was firm, warm, and unpretentious. I read your proposal, Miles said, sitting down. The section on long-term apprentice retention. That was brilliant. Most people just look at the enrollment numbers, but you focused on the 3-year outcome. That is the only thing that matters. He didn't look at my ring finger. He didn't look at my shoes. He looked at my work. Thank you, I said, feeling a genuine smile spread across my face. I think if we do not track the outcomes, we are just selling false hope. Exactly, Miles said. He leaned forward, unfolding the blueprints. So, I have some ideas on how to restructure the layout to create more collaborative spaces for the welding students. I wanted your eyes on it before I submitted it. You know the students better than I do. We spent the next hour talking. We talked about square footage, about lighting, about the psychology of learning spaces. There was no posturing. There were no buzzwords. It was just two professionals respecting each other's expertise. When he left, he turned at the door. Hey, Miles said. If you are free next week, maybe we could grab a coffee. I would love to hear more about your background. It is rare to meet someone in admin who actually cares about the kids this much. I would like that, I said. Great. I will email you. He walked out. I sat there for a moment. My heart did not hammer in my chest. I did not feel the anxious thrill of trying to impress a high-value man. I felt calm. I felt seen. Miles Bennett was not an executive. He was a planner. He built things, and I liked builders. That evening, I went home. I made myself dinner. I sat on my balcony and watched the city lights. My phone buzzed on the table. I looked at the screen. It was a number I had deleted but not blocked. Grant. Can we talk? Just 3 words. No apology, no explanation, just an entitlement to my time. He probably wanted to ask if I would write a character reference letter for his sentencing. He probably wanted to ask if I would drop the charges in exchange for some vague promise of future repayment. Or maybe he just wanted to see if he could still make me jump. I looked at the message. 6 months ago, that text would have sent me into a spiral. I would have called my friends. I would have analyzed the punctuation. I would have wondered if there was hope. Now I didn't feel anything. No anger, no sadness, just a mild annoyance, like a telemarketer calling during dinner. I did not type a scathing reply. I did not type, "Go to hell." I did not type, "Talk to my lawyer." I simply swiped left, delete. I put the phone down. I opened my banking app one last time. I created a new sub-account. I transferred $20,000 from the Future Empire Fund into it. I renamed the fund. It was no longer wedding. It was no longer house. I typed in the new name, Mia's Sedona Fund. Maybe I would buy a small cabin one day. Maybe I would just take trips. Maybe I would invest it. It didn't matter. It was mine. I took a sip of my wine. I thought about the night in the car. The night Grant ended our engagement. He had said, "All my friends are marrying executives. You do not." He meant it as an insult. He meant that I was not enough. He meant that I did not fit into the box of shallow ambition and hollow status that he had built his life around. He was right. I didn't marry an executive. I didn't marry a title. I didn't marry a fraud. I married the truth. I married my own peace of mind. And as I sat there in the quiet of my own apartment, debt-free, guilt-free, and fear-free, I realized that was the most exclusive club in the world. And the best part, I didn't even have to pay an initiation fee. Thank you so much for listening to the story of Mia and her journey to reclaiming her life. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Please leave a comment below with your city or country. Let's see how far our community reaches. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Leona Revenge Stories, hit that like button, and smash the hype button to help this video get recommended to more people who need a little inspiration. Your support means the world to me.